All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mindset You. This is episode 64, and today we have a special guest. We have Massiel, our amazing client that has been with us for how long, Rances?
It was around 2020, no?
More or less, yes.
Yeah. Client, now friend, right? So I feel like we've gotten close, especially Moises and Rances, right?
Right.
Part 1 of 2.
So I was like desperate, looking for somebody to help me with my kids. And then ended up being that I was the one who needed the help.
All right.
So that's how we met.
So when you say that, you know, that ended up you being the one that needed help, what do you mean by that?
So I remember walking into Vida Project, sitting with you. Beverly was there too. And I say, you know, my kids, and I'm going through this and through that. And I'm talking and talking. And Rances just sits there and listens to you. And then he pauses and he just says, you know, let me tell you, I can have 2 clients out of your kids pretty much. But I think we have to start with you first. And I said, me? And then I remember he said, you know what, let's do an exercise. I said, okay, no problem. He said, close your eyes. And I closed my eyes. And he starts guiding me. It was almost like a kind of meditation at that point, right? I remember feeling so scared, and I started shaking. I started crying. And I realized that I was scared. And he made me feel so safe in that moment that I was so scared. His voice made me feel safe. And that's when he said, you know what, why don't we work with you first, and then let's see where that goes. And then we'll work on your kids. Sold.
So Rances is calm, soothing, sexy voice is what seduced you into
Absolutely.
coaching. All right, Rances, we need more of that. Maybe you can use that on, you know, this mic right now. Get some more clients.
Massiel, I have a question though. So like you talked about that moment when you walked in, but that feeling of being scared and everything. And I want to hear a little bit about like, where are you now? Are you currently having that same fear? Like, where are you now in your life?
No, I don't walk around in fear anymore. The way I know that is the way I handle my feelings, my emotions. Before I would explode because I didn't know how to, I didn't understand what I was feeling. Now I have a better understanding of what is it that I'm feeling, so I can not control it, but acknowledge is really the word. I was actually, when we came, I was talking to Paola. I remember having these rages, like crazy. I don't have those anymore. I understand I'm getting angry, and I step back and I say, why am I getting angry? What's making me angry? Then when I understand what it is, sometimes it's not even a big deal. Sometimes it's just me, you know, ego or something. So I don't have those rage moments anymore. So that's a big difference from before and now.
Awesome. So before we move on, you can hear the full podcast at Mindset You, any place you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and any other thing, Stitcher, anything you can think of, we're there. And you can watch the live video of the podcast on YouTube, not live, but the recorded video on YouTube at Vida Project, or you can find all these resources, including how to create change in your life, which is what we're going to be talking about today, on vidaproject.com. We have all the podcasts listed and all the places you can find them. And we also have the theory of change there. So you go into that tab and you can see how you can create these type of changes in your life.
I think that's a great segue to one of the questions I've had for you. So how do you feel that coaching and even some of the services that you went through at Vita Project actually begin to help you create change?
I'm going to start this by saying my children when I talk about coaching to people, my kids will tell you, mom before life coaching, mom after life coaching, two different people. They felt before that they couldn't speak to me, and they couldn't because it was the judgmental, you can't do this, you can't do that. Or, it was just your ego and your beliefs, your table with your legs, right? So with Rances, I sat down and I started taking all the legs off my table. That created, and just, I guess, to explain that, the table is what you believe, or, your reality. The legs of the table is what makes that real, right? What create that reality. So when you start breaking those down, because maybe you believe something because your mom taught you, it's not what you really believe. So when you come from a place that you don't have those stigmas, then you can actually understand the perception of another person, like because what you think about something is not the same thing I think about it, right? So that gave me a better idea or a better understanding of being able to listen to someone's opinion, not taking it personal, not being quick to judge. That's their perception. I can't dictate what your perception is going to be. So that changed my relationship with my kids a lot. So they felt more comfortable telling me things. Of course, sometimes I'll be like, oh, but I was able to listen to see where they were coming from. Even with the relationship with people, I would get upset if somebody would say, oh, you didn't do, I would take it personal. But I'm like, that's what their perception is.
Mm-hmm. So curiosity, what did you say is the thing that you learned how to be more of?
Curious, or trying to see where they were coming from. I guess curiosity. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Rances, I'm curious to know, what was your perception of Massiel prior to the relationship of client-coach?
I mean, I met her the day that she walked in to Vita Project. And for me, we sat there, we got to talk, we had a conversation on the phone before, you told me about the kids that you wanted coaching for them. I think you had spoken to Beverly before. So Beverly told me a little bit more. But when I sat down, I was able to listen to your perspective. Mm-hmm. I was listening to how you viewed things. And for me, that was when I was able to identify that what you're struggling with is your perception of how things are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And when we have that view, that perception of like things are supposed to be this way, and if they're not this way, then I cannot be happy. I cannot accept it. I have to fight. That's a recipe for constant battle, constant fights, constant unhappiness. So when I first met Massiel, that's the idea that I got from her. It was more so about like the way that she wants her kids to be. So the other factor of that is I also believe that when we lead by example, that's the way that we help others kind of change around us. So with that being said, Massiel is a single mother. She's the biggest influence that her kids are going to have. The kids come see me coaching. If that at-home influence is still the same thing, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. All right. So for me, it was like, all right, we want to help your kids. All right. So let's help you. And that's how we help your kids.
Got it.
I was going to say that I was having a conversation with, I think it was one of my kids that were talking about therapy versus life coaching. And I've had therapy before, but for me, therapy, I used it to identify the problem. And then once I identify the problem, then I was like, I'm good. And then I kind of try to fix it the way I knew how to fix it. And I feel therapy is a Band-Aid. Life coaching is taking off the Band-Aid, scraping the wound, and then letting it heal, which is what happened or what is happening, because we're never done, right? To me, I do remember one particular story. I was married for a couple of years, and I thought that whatever I went through in my relationship, my ex-husband was very insecure, and he projected his insecurity towards me. It's a story that I say it because it's, people go through this, and some people are like, oh, I'm not going to say that. No, it's fine. When I had my daughter, Mia, my first daughter, she was a 10-pound baby. So I was 127 pounds. So, you got stretch marks. I remember him, I was walking out of the room one time and my towel fell down. And he's like, oh my God, cover yourself. You're disgusting. And I'm like, oh my God. So at that point in my life, I was 19 years old. My family was in the Dominican Republic. I was here. So every day you hear how you're not good enough, how disgusting you look, that breaks you down and makes you into this whole nother person. So now you're not even yourself. So fast forward a couple of years, you think that you're over it because we had a good relationship. I always wanted him to stay in my kid's life because he was a good dad. I am not going to take that away from him. He was just not a good husband. And I remember we had a session, and it was a full session because I told Rances that I needed to start him on child support because he didn't necessarily financially support my kids. He would buy them things here and there, but it was not like a constant support. I had to have, 2-3 jobs to do that. And Rances asked me, he's like, why don't you do it? And I was like, I don't know. I can't tell you why, because I'm over whatever happened in the past. Like that doesn't, he comes over to my house with his wife and his kids. So I don't have an issue. And he's like, okay, so let's talk about this. Why can't you just file it? And the motion was done. My boss actually, they did it for me. And I couldn't figure out. Then I said to him, you know what? I have to let him know. I think I just have to let him know that I'm going to do it. So Rances like, do it. I can't tell you. It took me a whole hour to send a text message like, I'm going to file a motion for child support. I cried. I was shaking. So that told me, or we figured, I was not over it. I was just masking it. I was just pretending that I was over it. And I remember Rances talked about, like, you have that 5-gallon water, you drip the water. There's a little bit of water left in the bottom of the gallon, of the 5-gallon. So you put more water in it. You didn't get rid of that water. So that water is moldy and it's just there, stagnant. So when you shake that, everything comes out. So that's what was happening in that moment. I didn't realize that was so still affecting me so much. So we kind of went through that, and I was able to send that text message. And then he actually responded. He's like, thank you for letting me know. That feeling of relief was just amazing. It was just like somebody took a big weight off my shoulders. And then after that, unfortunately, he just, we don't have a relationship anymore. Yeah.
So I just wanted to highlight the something that you said. You said like therapy is kind of like the Band-Aid, and then coaching was like scraping the wound and then putting the Band-Aid on. So I do align with that perspective because like yourself, I went to therapy as well. And at that time when I was going to therapy, I was working closely with Rances because of our business, but I saw him in that time more like a coach, right? Would you agree with that, Rances?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big part of like how our dynamic started, because you were a client first and then you became a business partner. So for us to shift to partners took a while. So we were still in that kind of state.
So at that, in that state, Rances, like I went to therapy. What I kind of understood later in hindsight was that therapy for me was the identification of these stories that may be limiting you and how you're perceiving them. And then the coaching is the actual application. How do you begin to use that information to do something with it? So in your story, what I heard was you probably saw this story with your husband play many times in your head. And then Rances, by pushing you to take an action to deal with the story, which is like, go collect the child support, right? And then forcing you to actually deal with that story. That's how I see therapy versus coaching.
Right.
And I think that for me, I believe that the growth was exponential because I did both at the same time. So I would see a session, and then the next day I would talk to Rances about that session. And then it was like, oh, here's the application. Here's the understanding. Here's another perspective. And then I would go to work on those things. I have a question for both of you. What are some of the biggest obstacles that you had to face with each other in the coach-and-client relationship?
I'll start because it goes into what you spoke about before, right? Which is lack of awareness, right? And like our theory of change concept, it all starts with awareness. And you were so confident, like you mentioned in that story, you were so confident that it was like, no, I dealt with that. I moved on, right? So trying to help you highlight the awareness to become aware that these things are still present, to me was some of the harder parts, right? Because it was like, again, that level of confidence is like, no, that doesn't bother me. Like, you know, you spoke about the stories about when you were married and, you know, the abuse that you would deal with. And you were like, yeah, but I'm over that, right? And when we would try to get past that first layer, you would put up so much resistance because, you know, to explain it from a coach's perspective, I knew, I was aware that you were repressing and not suppressing because you weren't aware that you were even experiencing these things. You were repressing these emotions. So for me to get you from that repression to awareness, for me was like one of the biggest obstacles, you know, and I think having you go to that point through the physical experience, like you mentioned, like that first meeting, the meditation, that you were able to feel those things, like that was like how we were able to start moving towards getting over that obstacle.
So what I realized is that I repressed so many feelings that I was pretty much a robot. I was just existing. There's a body just going. That's just me.
Sorry. I call Rances a robot. So.
Oh. But he's an intentional robot. And like, so it's a little bit different. I was just like an involuntary robot. Just like the wheel is turning, but nothing is happening. It's just going. So he was able to, and I remember another feeling when that first meditation was, the fear was because of the vulnerability that I was feeling at that moment. I've never felt that vulnerable in a long time, or probably ever. So the fact that I was going in so deep, it felt like if somebody just stripped your clothes off and you're like naked in the middle of like Times Square. That's the feeling I was having. So I was like, I don't want this. This feels uncomfortable. So being vulnerable was, I think, one of the biggest obstacles for me, because I didn't want him to like cross over like that layer, because that's how I protect myself. Like being vulnerable, you're more prone to getting hurt, right? So that's what I was thinking.
What helped you
What helped me
deal with that?
Your sexy voice.
Sexy voice. No, it's true. Is the way you handled my changes and emotions, and the way you coached me through my that first session. Just the way you talked me through it was just amazing for me.
So one of the questions that is coming up for me is, I hate when Rances does that shit, man. That's why I'm like, give him another concussion. One of the questions that comes up for me is, in your relationship, and you said it before, that you struggled with judgments, that you struggled with, these beliefs. So when going into coaching, did those judgments or beliefs come up when working with Rances, in the sense of about Rances and the coaching and the theory of change and the philosophy as a whole? Did any of those judgments come up when working with him?
No, I'm going to say no. Maybe when it had to do with my kids.
Okay.
Maybe when he would say, "Wait, why don't one of the exercises, FBI? I forget exactly what they mean,
Feeling,
but just
behavior, impact."
So there was one issue that I had with one of the girls, and you coached me through kind of how to address it, and I was like, no, I don't. It was a conversation. My daughter wanted to do something, and I didn't think it was appropriate, and he's like, "Oh, why not?" And I'm like, "Because no." So that was the only time that it kind of.
So you felt like it was a disagreement in approaches, or?
It was just my belief of the not appropriate or absolutely not. And then his perspective, right? He's like, "But why not? Because maybe this can happen." And I was like, "Oh, you know what? You're right." So that was the only time I think that I was like, no. But other than that, I'm like, "Yes, master, whatever you say."
How about for you, Rances? Any judgments, or I'll phrase it differently. Anything that you wished were available in Massiel's personality when working with her to kind of create change at a faster pace?
So I really enjoyed working with Massiel. She was, like she mentioned, she was very willing. There's times with clients that we have to go over the obstacle of their willingness. Like they come in, they willing, but then they get into those spaces of discomfort and they're like, no, Massiel never really had that. She was very willing, and I think we also both understood that what we were doing was necessary for what she wanted to achieve. So outside of her forgetfulness, because the FBI thing, that was something that I gave her that tool 10 times. And it wasn't until I think she started bringing her notebook that she started implementing things better, because we would talk about, okay, so this is FBI. You're going to use this FBI concept when you're talking to your kids. And she'd be like, okay, got it. Yes, FBI. We'll repeat it like 30 times. And then the next session comes and she'll be like, what was that again? I remember you said something. And it's like, but then she started bringing a notebook. And once she started bringing the notebook in, she would actually review the notebook on her own time. And to me, that was a big change in terms of implementation and speed of implementation of things.
Massiel, when did you actually notice? When did you identify that you were actually changing? Can you pinpoint that moment?
Honestly, it was almost immediate. I noticed it first with my kids. It was just a completely different interaction and dynamic in my household. Literally the first 2 weeks, like it was just the first time that my kid sat down and she's like, oh, can I tell you something? I was like, oh, are you talking to me? Like, you want to talk to me? And then after I asked her, I'm like, why, how come you told me this? Like a couple of days later, she's like, Mom, you're just like so calm. Like you're just, I wanted to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I didn't necessarily realize that on my own. I realized it because of actions like that. Did
you both establish some type of measure to identify growth or progress?
We did. And I remember I kind of went off on you because you casually mentioned it and didn't even realize that it was the thing. Do you remember what it was?
Was it the little book?
So the first thing that we said, how do we know that you're changing? How do we know that this is having an impact? And you had said, well, I think I would love to see my daughters come into the room and talk to me, to come into my room and talk to me, like willing, like not me telling them, but them come in. And we were in a session, I think it was like 3 weeks in. And you were like, yeah, because the girls came into my room and they were telling me and telling me about boys and all this stuff. I was like, are you kidding me right now? And you're like, what? What is it? And this goes into that forgetfulness. It's like, Massiel, and I pulled up the book and I'm like, look what we said here. We said that you're moving forward. You know that this is having the impact that you want when your daughters walk into your room to talk to you. Mm-hmm. And you just casually talking about this. It's like, yeah, this has been happening.
Right.
And you're like, oh, yeah, that's true.
Is that my reality just turns into the new reality, and that's just how it is.
So before, I want to shift gears. But before we do that, don't forget to subscribe to any of our podcasts on any channel. Let me say that again. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on any channel. You can find us at vitaproject.com and YouTube as well.
Next episode, part 2, Doing the Impossible.